Hello and welcome back to a brand new season of Jo's art history podcast, Bitesize. Small, manageable podcast episodes that sees me, Jo McLaughlin, your resident host and art historian, deep dive into a specific artwork or artist in 10 minutes or less. It's great to be back, and this will be a new 10-parter. So for the next 10 weeks, I'll be selecting 10 works or artists from across art history to deep dive into either their back catalogue or a specific work that they have done that has caught my eye or attention in some way. And we'll be kicking off this series by looking at a work by British artist Mat Collishaw called Last Meal on Death Row. I had actually never come across this series before from Matt, and it was actually while I was visiting an exhibition very recently with a friend who pointed out that one of the works from the series was in the show and then gave me a very quick overview of what the series was about. And it's the first time in a long time where I've thought, oh, I have to look into that. And it just felt like a very good episode to kick the series off with. So without further ado, let's get started, and I hope you enjoy. For those of you that may not know, Mat Collishaw is known for his provocative and often unsettling works that challenge our perceptions and provoke deep reflection. He was born in Nottingham in 1966, and he studied at Goldsmiths, University of London, and emerged as one of the leading figures of the young British artist movement, so the YBAs. I think I've got a slight obsession with the YBAs. I seem to always talk about them on this podcast. Anyway, he's emerged as one of the leading figures of the YBA movement in the late 1980s, alongside his contemporaries Damien Hirst and Tracey Emin, to name but a few. His works span various mediums, including photography, video and installation, and they often explore themes of beauty, violence and mortality. The artist himself often refers to old masters. Now, people that don't know what old masters are, we're talking about Renaissance works of art. We're talking about your Caravaggios, your Leonardo da Vinci's, that ilk. They're known as old masters. So he often refers to the work of old masters. And most of his art pieces contain references to historical themes and classical techniques. Borrowed images, shall we say, so borrowing references from these classical images are often digitally processed and appear in a new interpretation. And the works are also referring to the relationship between representation and perception, as well as reality. And to quote Matt himself about his practice, he says, "To find out what it is that we are creating when we are making this simulacrum of the world," and also if no one else knows what simulacrum is, because I certainly didn't, it just means image. So to find out what we're creating when we're making this simulacrum of the world, and how much that is divorcing us from the world, or how much it's making us understand the world. It's kind of what we are as human beings that interests me. And for that, I come back on so many different fields of interest, from the kind of evolutionary biology, which I'm interested in, to the history of art, and the also ever-evolving technologies present in the world. So now that you have a bit more of an understanding of Matt's practice and what he experiences or what he tries to explore in his work, let's move on to talk about Last Meal on Death Row, which is a photographic series where Collishaw meticulously recreates and photographs the final meals requested by inmates on death row. These images are rich in detail, and they're laden with symbolism, and they draw the viewer in to give this very inviting moment to contemplate life and death and rituals that we all observe in and around death. For this series, the works are heavily influenced by still life paintings of the 17th century, and that's very, very apparent when you look at them. The images are rich in detail. As I said, they're laden with symbolism. They're all set in these very sort of dark, still life-esque, very much what you would expect to see if you were to visit the National Gallery. What is particularly beautiful about this series is Collishaw's use of chiaroscuro, which is using light to play with depth and perception within the work. And what's really incredible is his use of light really does make them appear like they are a painting, even though they are a very aged painting, shall I say, even though they were produced 10, 15 years ago. There's multiple works within this series. I've had some sort of conflicting facts when I've been reading about the series. Some say there's 13, some say there's far more than that. I think there's way more than 13. But essentially, each image within the series is named after the inmate whose final meal is depicted. And he depicts some very, very famous serial killers. So John Wayne Casey, for example. Casey was one of the most notorious serial killers in American history. I think he's also known as the Clown Killer. And in his portrait, or in this portrait of his last meal, shall we say, he's requested a dozen deep fried shrimp, a bucket of original recipe KFC, French fries, a pound of strawberries. And the meal is presented in this way where it's very sort of excessive and, yeah, it's quite gruesome almost, as like a nod to Casey's crimes. We also have Ted Bundy is included in the series. Ted Bundy, who actually declined to have a meal, but was given the traditional last meal of steak, eggs and hash browns and toast. And we also have Ronnie Lee Gardner, who I'm not too familiar with in terms of what he did or what his crime was, but Gardner opted for a meal of lobster tail, steak, apple pie, ice cream and a 7-Up. And he also requested, side fun fact, to watch Lord of the Rings while he ate this. And then you also have, very interestingly, one of the only sort of female inmates on death row that he depicts. Her final meal was a salad. Each photograph is carefully composed, with the food arranged in a manner that is both aesthetically pleasing and deeply evocative. The lighting, the textures, and even the choice of tableware all contribute to the narrative in this series, and it invites viewers to reflect on the final moments of these individuals' lives. In an interview, Collishaw said, "The last meal is a moment of humanity within an inhumane system. It's a ritual that humanises the condemned in their final hours, offering them a resemblance of dignity and the choice in a situation where they have none." Journalists have also weighed in on the series, praising it for its thought-provoking nature and its ability to spark conversations about the death penalty. One critic has described it as a haunting meditation on morality and justice, while another has highlighted that the emotional weight and ethical complexity that Collishaw has captured within each image. Now, the series itself, it not only invites us to ponder the personal stories behind these last meals, but also it challenges us as the viewer to consider the broader social issue. What does it mean to be offered a final meal to someone that you're about to execute? What does this ritual refer to in terms of our collective consciousness and our views of the justice and mercy system? By focusing on these really hyper-personal moments and portraying them in a way that is very sort of classical art history, almost sort of elevating these very dark final moments and portraying them in such a way, Collishaw sheds light on the often overlooked human aspect of the death penalty. And his work encourages empathy and introspection, and it prompts you to question your own beliefs on the death penalty and if you think it should happen or if it should be scrapped entirely. And that I will leave to you to decide. And I will leave you with one final quote from the artist on the series. In researching hundreds of last meals chosen by prisoners on death row prior to execution, and then restaging them as meals in the manner of Dutch 17th century still life paintings, many prisoners chose food that was either specific to their ethnicity or food they would have enjoyed during their childhood. This poignant choices that are made in this chilling civilised process corresponds to the vanitas tradition, a genre that reflects on man's futile accumulation of worldly goods and the transcendence of life. The photographs were framed in black, heavy moulded frames, very typical to the Dutch still life, so that they became surrogate portraits for the prisoners. And there you have it. That is Mat Collishaw's Last Meal on Death Row. And there you have it, another episode of Jo's Art History podcast, Bitesize. Small, manageable podcast episodes that see me, Jo McLaughlin, your host and resident art historian, deep dive into a specific artwork or artist in 10 minutes or less. If you've enjoyed this episode, please make sure to like, rate and subscribe. It helps other people find us and it means more to me than you know. And while you're doing that, why not share the podcast with someone you think might enjoy it too? If you'd like to support the future of the podcast, please consider purchasing and gifting me a book from my Amazon wishlist, which is in the show notes below. This will be used to research future episodes of the podcast, both full-length episodes and bite-sized episodes too. If you'd like to get in touch, you can do that in several ways. You can email me, joesarthistory@gmail.com, or you can find me on Instagram, which is @joesarthistory. Finally, I've been your host and resident art historian, Jo McLaughlin. Thank you so much for listening. And until next time, keep learning and remember, art is for all. Bye.